Okay, this is the last part of semantics, and it has to do with syntax and sentence interpretation. Okay, so we turn to the problem of sentence interpretation with an emphasis on how the positioning of words and phrases in syntactic structures helps determine the meaning of the entire sentence consistent with the following principle. That principle is the principle of compositionality. So, the meaning, what does it mean, the principle of compositionality? That the meaning of a sentence is determined by the meaning of its component parts and the manner in which they are arranged in syntactic structure. So the way in which they are organized determines the meaning, yes, of a sentence. Okay, one of the ideas, to make it very clear, has to do with structural ambiguity. So some sentences are structurally ambiguous in that the meaning of their component word can be combined in more than one way. So for example, they have rich women and men. So rich men and women, for example, where rich can be seen as the property of both women and men in this case. So you have an noun phrase here, so it represents to both women and men, or that rich just represents women. So we have rich women and men on the other side, on the other hand. Okay, so this, according to the way in which combine the elements of the sentence, the meaning changes. Have a look at the sentence. Nicole saw the people with binoculars. So we can say that the people who saw Nicole were using or having the binoculars, or on the other hand, was Nicole the one who was using the binoculars, not the people. Okay, so depending on the way you arrange the words, yes, the constituents of the sentence, the meaning will differ. Okay, that's very easy, that's very simple. Now we have presupposition. So sometimes our attitudes and beliefs when we utter a sentence are as important as the attitudes and beliefs of the addressee for the way the sentence is interpreted. So, and I think that one of the problems, I might say, we have nowadays is with the messages that we send by WhatsApp. That sometimes I send a message with some kind of presuppositions or tones of voice or which are different to the one who reads the message, and the presuppositions might change because my attitude sometimes differ from the attitudes or beliefs of the person who is reading something and not listening to me. So if I have the sentence, the mayor of Boston is in town today, it implies the belief or assumption of the speaker that there is a mayor of Boston. Otherwise, I couldn't say the mayor of Boston is in town today. So such an assumption is called a presupposition. So the sentence, the mayor of Boston is in town today, is said to presuppose the sentence, there is a mayor of Boston. Presuppose the sentence, there is. Yes, I understand, I presuppose it. Presuppositions are different from entailment in that presuppositions also hold true when the presupposing sentence is negated. So we say the mayor of Boston is in town today, the mayor of Boston is not in town today. So the presupposes that there is a mayor of Boston, never mind it is negative. So I don't regret living in Boston, I don't regret leaving Boston, presupposes that I left Boston. Then I think that we should be as clear as possible in order to avoid presuppositions which are not right or correct, okay, to avoid misunderstanding. Okay, so that is one idea. Now, another important aspect, so we have structural ambiguity, presuppositions, and then we have thematic roles. So another aspect of semantic interpretation involves determining the roles that the reference of noun phrases play in the situations described by sentences. So it is used to describe the part played by a particular entity in an event. For example, I have the senator send the lobster from Boston to Seattle. So in this case, the senator is the agent, which is the entity that performs the action, yeah? Then the lobster, remember that we're talking about noun phrases, okay? So we have the lobster, which is the thing, the entity undergoing an action or a movement, okay? And then we have the source, which is the starting point from Boston to Seattle, which is the goal, the ending point, or the location, the athletes practice in the Astrodome. So we have the athletes as an agent, the performer, and Astrodome, the location. So each noun phrase has a thematic role. But who assigns the thematic role to each noun phrase? So the thematic roles originate in word meaning, we know that, yes? But some words and the thematic roles implied by their meanings. I have an example. Harry hit the ball. So I said, if the sentence Harry hit the ball contains an agent, which is Harry, the performer, and hit the ball, which is the theme, it is because the verb hit has the type of meaning that implies an entity that does the hitting, which is the agent, and an entity that gets the hit, the theme. So the idea is that the verb in this case is that the one that assigns, let's say, the thematic roles to the noun phrases. So these roles are then assigned to noun phrases based on the position in syntactic structure, with each noun phrase receiving a single role. So a preposition assigns a thematic role to its complement, a noun phrase. So from Boston, so the preposition assigns the thematic role to the noun phrase. So to go, okay? So if we come here, we'll see that hit, agent, and theme. Walk, agent, he walks to that place from Boston, near the lake. Okay, very good. And a verb assigns a theme role, if it has one, to its complement, noun phrase. So the campers boiled the water. So boiled, the verb boiled has agent, the campers, and the water, theme. Okay. Students should exercise. Students should exercise. So exercise is the agent. A verb assigns an agent role to its subject, noun phrase. This is exemplifying the following structures. Very good. So it's very simple, right? So what happens in the deep structure? I think it's very interesting here because this sentence has a deep structure. Okay, like the man should bring what? Okay, remember that we have the movement. Yes, in the W8. Movement. The man should bring. Should the man bring something? Okay. So, what is the thematic role in W8 question? Okay, the man should bring. So that could be the theme. So a noun phrase deep structure position determines its thematic role, not the surface structure. Do you understand? So the man should bring a ball. Okay, what? A ball. So the wall. What in WH question will have the thematic role as it has in the deep structure. It shows that syntactic structure not only represents the way in which words are organized into phrases, because remember what the deep structure is what it is about. It is how the sentence appears, or the order in which the constituents and words and parts of the sentence are present, but also is relevant to semantic interpretation. And have a look at this idea of passives, even though we haven't analyzed in the deep structure the passive voice. But you say, okay, this is the by agent. Why do we use the by agent? Because we had the thief was arrested by the police. And we say the thief, and it is not the agent. Okay, it is the thief. And you say, well, but who is the one that carries the action? The police. So that's why we call it by agent. Yeah, when we move. So that is one of the explanations, let's say, for the passive voice. Okay, another idea of it is the interpretation of pronouns. So the category of pronouns includes words such as he, she, himself, and herself. Okay, these words are characterized by the fact that their interpretation can be determined by another element in the same sentence. Okay, so this other element is called the antecedent. So we have Jim's friends admire him, and Jim admires himself. So the former type of pronoun is called pronominal, him, and the later type is a reflexive pronoun. But what's the difference here? Because he said Jim's friends admire him, okay? And when I'm talking about this pronominal, do I refer to Jim's friend, or can I refer to any other person? So Jim's friends admire him. I can admire, for example, Jim's father. I can talk about any other person. Not necessarily I'm talking about Jim. Okay, it can refer to Jim, but it can also refer to any other person. But what happens with Jim admires himself? What happens here with the reflexive pronoun? It cannot represent anyone else but Jim. Okay, so Jim admires himself. It cannot represent another person. It's talking about Jim. Alright? So the principle A reflexive pronoun must have an antecedent that C commands it. That it refers to. So the principle needed to ensure this interpretation makes use of the notion C command, which is defined as follows. So the noun phrase A, C commands noun phrase B if the first category above, noun phrase, contains in noun phrase B. So have a look here. This is the noun phrase A contains the noun phrase B. Okay, the boy's uncle admired himself. I'm talking about the boy's uncle. I'm not talking about any other person. That's the principal A. But the principal B, a pronominal must not have an antecedent that's ecomassive. So him can refer to the boy, but not to the boy's uncle. Not necessarily to the boy's uncle. The opposite of what we observe for himself. Okay? Nothing prevents interpretation in which him and the boy refer to the same person. It cannot be necessarily the same person. So this is the interpretation of pronouns. Okay, so Baker is missing there. Okay, so that is the idea of how important it is the way we perceive and the way we contextualize, conceptualize, categorize, and how the elements, or the way the elements are arranged in the sentence, determine the meaning, okay, or can change the meaning of a sentence or a phrase, okay. So this is all for semantics. Thanks for listening.